Welcome back, Wastelanders. I am Wizard, and I am once again leaving Vault 111 in Fallout 4 to start a new playthrough in 2025. Why? Well, if you haven't seen my Red Rocket Tour video, which I released some time ago, you can find it here. And many of you asked for a build video, which was impossible for me to do, so I decided to start a new playthrough to recreate that settlement. But before I get there, I'm going to build Sanctuary. And after roughly 120 hours of building, this is what I achieved. Why did I spend so much time? Because for the first time in all of my playthroughs, I'm actually going to help the Minutemen prepare for the future and rebuild the Commonwealth. So I had two main goals for this build of Sanctuary. Number one was to repurpose each of the homes so that settlers could comfortably occupy them and live in them. But I also wanted to build a fortress for the Minutemen to act as a headquarters until we go and retake the castle. I named the fortress after the last respected general of the Minutemen, so it is aptly named Fort Becker. Now, aside from that, when you first get here, the place is absolutely wrecked. There are trees down all over the place. Some of the homes are completely ruined, and the ones that were completely ruined, I replaced with a completely different type of building. I didn't rebuild a home on top of the old ruined houses. But after much cleanup of everything that was wrecked and abused and worn down, I think the result of this settlement is really cool. Each of the buildings is completely unique. No two look the same other than the two barracks buildings as part of the fortress. But this first ruined house was turned into the headquarters building, which is sort of like the centerpiece of the build. This one I replaced with the vertibird landing pad. And the central ruined home here was turned into the bar/arcade that I called the Gilded Ghoul. This ruined home over here was turned into the general store, specifically for the Vault-Tec rep, and this one next to it was turned into the clothing store for Anne Hargraves, the level 4 clothing vendor. Down here I built a river walk, boardwalk / thing, whatever, and the rest of it you'll see as we get into the video. A couple of quick housekeeping items that I want to get out of the way. If you haven't joined my Discord, I'd love to have you there. I've got a growing and very positive and helpful community, and it'd be great if you could join us. Also, please consider supporting me on Patreon for $3 a month, and for your generous donation, you can watch all of my monetized YouTube content on Patreon ad-free. So with that out of the way, sit back and enjoy as I show you exactly how I turned Sanctuary into a thriving town with a Minutemen Fortress. Post-war Sanctuary is an absolute disaster. Now, once you rescue the survivors of the attack on Quincy and bring them to Sanctuary, they kind of need a place they can call home. And we also need to recruit more Minutemen and get some more settlers here. So if we're going to turn this into anything the Minutemen can be proud of and use as a starting point and attract more settlers, we've got some cleanup to do. You get the picture. I used the scrap almost everything mod to clean up the entire settlement, and once that was done, I needed to start fixing the roofs of the homes. So starting with the one nearest to the entry to Sanctuary, I used warehouse roofs to get an alignment to the existing structure here and snap them across, but quickly found that my initial spacing was off and my overhang would have been way too big on the right side. So moving this over to get roughly 1/3 of overhang on the right side of this home, went ahead and re-snapped my other roof pieces and then got the last one right here. I was happy with that spacing, so I gave myself roof access with this temporary stair and using another warehouse roof piece aligned to the first row, I moved this to be centered with the ridge of the home. Once I had that in place, I went ahead and built the rest of the ridge roof pieces based on that one. Now I need to snap in some warehouse wall pieces to establish the proper position for the first row of roofs on either side that I initially just used for alignment. So let's get those on there too. Easy peasy, just like that, the roof is done. Now to complete this, I used barn floors to create a soffit running all the way around. And just like that, the roof of the first house, which I'm going to call the low house, is completed. Now I need to patch up all the holes in the walls, but before I can get there, of course, Grey Garden needs my help.
Locked and loaded. Good hunting. Prepare for landing. Touchdown could be a little rough.
Suck it, Raiders. Y'all good now, robots? I hope so. Now I can get back to work. Let's patch these walls. Low house complete other than furnishings and decorations, so now I can move on to what is going to be Barracks A for Fort Becker. After getting this roof on there, after finding the alignment, I should say, I decided to use the end cap wall technique to find the center based on the ridge of the home. The only downside to this technique over the previous is that you then have to build all the way across to figure out if your lateral positioning is appropriate or not. So I was happy with the center about the roof line there, and before I build across, I'm also going to double check the height using some floor pieces and make sure they intersect with the existing overhang correctly. So once I have all that figured out and I build my base end cap wall, I can then go ahead and start building my roof pieces all the way across, and for this one I did use barn roofs. And here I find that my lateral positioning is indeed not right. So I go back over to my starter piece here and push it over to the right as far as I can until it starts to snap up. And then I just drop it back down and then rebuild the whole roof. Here we go. whatever reason, I was using warehouse walls on this side of the house. Don't ask me why. I was just building like a fiend. So really quick, let me just switch those to barn. Good, and now we can build the soffit. I also patched the walls, as you could see there, but along with that, I decided to move the bathroom from its existing space over here to the old furnace room. The main reason for that is because this is a barracks building and it doesn't need a large bathroom, but also because the wall separating this bathroom from the living space was completely gone. So instead of being left with this little tiny, kind of unusable space here, I chose to move the bathroom into this space. And I think I can do this thanks to Place Anywhere, but it could also be due to the Scrap Almost Everything mod. So Barracks A is now done with a new roof and patched walls, and I can move on to Barracks B. But since you've seen me do this a couple of times now, I'm not going to show you the whole process, and I'm just going to show you the finished final product here. Also a glimpse of everything else that I built around it. For the next home, this is going to be specifically for Sturgis, and since he is sort of a handyman, the outside of his house is going to be littered with basically what looks like a junkyard. And the alignment for this roof was a little bit different, as the right side of the roof is not square to the front edge. So I got my alignment using the front edge of the home, and then moved the roof piece over to basically just be able to just cover the major broken portion of that wall that's sticking out up here. Using the warehouse walls, I found my alignment and got all that established all at once. Now, I wasn't worried about the overhang on the left side, because if it's overhanging a lot, that'll just give Sturgis a little extra room for his workshop area. And with all that done and a few roofs snapped into place, let me go ahead and finish that up. What I'm doing here is building in a temporary wall so that I can place ridge roof pieces up to the dormer on this house. The dormer presented a bigger challenge over the previous houses, as they didn't have any dormer features. So once I got my roofs up to this point, I had to figure out how to build over the dormer without it looking too obnoxious and out of place. I needed to make some space for myself, but I also used this roof piece that was left over here to snap up and establish a new height. Now, I also realized that I could use the warehouse single tile ridge roof pieces, but in order to space it out correctly, I needed to do a half offset in both directions based on some floor units. So that's what I'm doing here, is placing these quarter floors to set myself up for a half offset full floor tile. Get rid of this one and place my full floor, and now I can replace that scaffolding floor with warehouse for ease of snapping. This is going to set me up to have the actual ridge roof pieces in the middle of two full roof tiles on either side. You can see here I'm using half walls in the center with angled walls on either side. And then you can rebuild the roof pieces that intersect with those walls once you have them in place. Now let me finish up this dormer portion of the roof. Now once that is built, I can get rid of the temporary wall that I placed here and replace it with the proper roof pieces. I can close off the front and back of the dormer with these warehouse window pieces. I thought they looked really good up there. And then after I get rid of the rest of this temporary wall, the only thing that's left is to build the soffit around the entire roof. And now, of course, I patched up the walls on Sturgis' house as well, but now this is done. Looking good, and you can see it's got a full half-tile overhang on the left side, but like I said, that's a good thing in this case because that gives Sturgis some extra covered area for his workshop. Making good progress, eh, June? Now to turn the Soul Survivor's house into this, which is going to be my home in Sanctuary, but I also wanted a rooftop shack up on the top to kind of set it apart from the rest of the homes and continue making each of these houses look unique. I've already established my positioning and center on the ridge of the home, as you can see here with my scaffolding ramp, which is also going to be access to the rooftop shack. Now, I was thinking I could just start building floors here, but they wouldn't snap onto this one. I'm assuming just because the ridge of the house was so close. So I had to build some floors across and some temporary ramps to get the floors to start snapping. Now, I'm going to talk you through this whole roof building process because so far it is the most complex of any of the previous houses that I have refurbished. And the next houses also, at least the next two, are also more complex. And eventually the main sanctuary house has a very interesting shack build on the top as well. So my access ramp to the rooftop shack up here is going to be 2 of the scaffolding ramp units wide. And once I get back over here, I can get rid of these temporary ramps in order to build some floors down here to get the roof started using the actual warehouse roof pieces. Now, I like using the barn floors on exteriors because they have a significantly more worn look than the warehouse floors. And I'm also using the warehouse walls around this roof as well. I like the way the warehouse walls look next to the homes that have blue walls. So once I got my roofs here, I needed to fill this gap. That was pretty easy. Just get rid of these 2 ramps, place in these warehouse sort of roof end pieces, and then the ramps go back into place, no problem. Now I can start establishing my roof across the back of the home here, and just using a combination of angled warehouse walls and half walls. This was fairly straightforward. You know, in some places I needed to place a temporary roof to snap in the correct wall piece and then replace whatever I had there before. Now, I placed the scaffolding floors temporarily just because they were easy to get in there at first, but I don't want to actually use them on this shack, so I'm just going to replace these with the warehouse floors because they're all going to be on the interior. Now, I am later on going to change this as well. These are also kind of placeholders, but since they're the warehouse pieces, they allow the warehouse walls to snap on really easily. Now at this point, I'm just using some fairly basic techniques of removing certain pieces so I can snap other pieces on the right way, and then replacing what I got rid of temporarily. The whole point here is to make this roof look unique and not boxy. Have some elevation change and kind of make it look like the roof was sort of built around the rooftop shack that I'm going to build later on. In some places, as you can see, I can get full walls in, and then just using the angled walls with half walls in order to continue building the roof around the house. Now back up to the roof, I'm starting just by, again, getting pieces built on so that I can get walls built all the way around. So at this point, I've got all the walls built around the house, and I like the way they're looking. This one needs to go, so I can place a corner roof here because it just looks like it supports the corner of the shack a lot better versus dropping straight down. Same thing again, placing half walls so I can get an angled wall to fill in the gap. And then I'm going to put another floor piece here with an angled wall, a roof piece to get an angled wall again, and now I can build roofs across the front as well. That half wall, I should say, was there just to snap that angled wall into place, so I can get rid of that and then snap a roof to the angled wall and get a corner roof and 2 more warehouse angled wall pieces to close that up. And there we have the result of all of that. Now, I want to build a covered porch all the way across the front of this house to give it, again, a little more interest and make it look a little more unique and a little less blocky. That stair was temporary, and then I used this concrete floor with the rounded edge, snap on a scaffolding frame, and then replace that scaffolding floor with a shack floor because it's better for pathing, and the settlers tend to use that more successfully. Now, to get the roof of the porch built, I needed to snap a shack upper floor so I could snap roofs to it. And then to get the wall to get the floor built, I just needed to snap a wall and then snap a floor to the wall. Get some floors snapped across, and we can get rid of the wall. And now I place another floor here just to kind of tie everything together a little bit better, and a floor underneath of that stair just to make sure pathing works effectively, or I should say just works. Here's the last shack roof piece, and now we have columns on the porch as well.
So, you impressed yet? I told you I was a damn good shot.
I haven't really noticed.
Oh, come on.
The next house is going to be called the boxcar house, because I'm going to build a sort of boxcar shack over the old carport, as you can see here, with the finished product. This was a significantly more difficult roof to build, as I was not able to simply and quickly find the center of the roof or the lateral spacing to establish the overhangs on each side of the house. I had to start building on this corner after finding my alignment with a floor piece and moving this over here just to get started. But I had to figure out a way to build this roof up and over the top of the house and all the way down to the other side. And since this house basically has 2 main roof ridges that are perpendicular to each other, the difficulty in this one was, how do I get the angled roof pieces to align perfectly in a perpendicular fashion once I got over there to the, as you can see, that ridge is turned, so we have a double ridge. I found center on this one by just manually placing the roof centered to the chimney, as it seemed like the part of the house that would give me the best reference to center. And then I just, snapped all my pieces that I already had built back into place based on that position. Now, as I go through this, you're going to see me working across the roof to evaluate the position that I started with, which was incorrect several times, like I mentioned. But I'm going to work across and try to explain it as best I can. One of the things that I kind of ran into or decided to do differently was to use some shack roofs on this one to set it apart from the rest. And here you can see I'm realizing that my overhang is going to be way more on the right side than what I have over here. So I just, once again, get a floor piece established that I can use to start shifting, I guess you could say, the entire roof build over to the left. Now I kind of just use the width of the half floor piece as reference to figure out, okay, what do I need? And this wound up being about a half floor tile on the left side, which gave me a full floor tile on the right side. So I know I need something closer to a quarter of a half roof intersecting with the existing roof of the home, or in other words, roughly 3/4 of a half floor tile of overhang on each side of the house, all the while maintaining my center to the ridge that I have already established and am happy with, as well as maintaining the height that I've already established and am happy with. So once again, once I have another position that I want to try, I just snap all of my existing pieces back on to the new position, including the roofs. And to get the, ridge, the perpendicular ridge aligned, I had to use these flat roofs up top. And then, similar to the Soul Survivor's house, use some half walls. So that way I had something to snap the angled walls onto so that I could get angled roofs snapped on perpendicular to the other ridge of the home, the longer ridge. This lets me build out to the front of the house on this side, snap my wall pieces back onto the new position, and then check the overhang spacing with some floor pieces as I did on the left side. And you can see here, they're about the same, and I was happy with that. So now what I needed to do was figure out how to snap the shack roof pieces across the ridge of the house. So I had to drop down using a half wall to get a flat shack roof snapped on to allow the high-pitched shack roofs to snap onto the flat shack roofs. And the thing I found was that the existing home structure did intersect slightly in some spots with these shack roofs, but because of the really kind of rusted look of the shack roofs, I think it looks fine, to be honest. And eventually I replaced the flat shack roofs with floors all the way around the ridge pieces, and then snap on the shack railings. So it kind of hides it, and unless you walk up here, you don't really see the old home structure intersecting through the shack roof ridge pieces. I did leave the barn roof pieces on the right side, the perpendicular ridge, because I felt, the color of them works better with the gray, non-rusted portions of the shack roofs. So with a total of 6 of the high-pitch shack roof pieces in position, I thought it would be most helpful for the rest of the build of this house to go ahead and build the soffit floor all the way around and build the rest of the walls and roofs up off of those. So here we go. With the soffit built, I can now use those as a starting point for the rest of the roof structure and build the access to the roof itself. With the roof access and the outdoor areas built up here, and all of the ridge completed and all that, I can now do the more complicated part and establish where this boxcar is going to be positioned exactly. On top of that, I have to figure out how settlers are going to access this boxcar shack and ensure that they can path everything successfully. So I started with the boxcar itself and aligning it to the roof pieces that I have boxing out the actual roof of the house there. And then using shack floors manually positioned, I can start manipulating the positioning of the boxcar itself to make sure that the back side of it that will be closed off isn't going to block access to that staircase back there. So placed the end cap, and it wound up being too far back, so I went another half floor spacing, half floor tile forward towards the front of the house, and that led me to a really good position for the boxcar. Floors do snap directly to the boxcar, but the positioning is a little bit different than if you were snapping to floor pieces. So I just kept working my way around and figuring out where to place the access stair. And I found right here that my height of the boxcar was off. I hate having little gaps in things. So the way I fixed this was just by moving these shack steps out another half of a floor and building around the floor underneath to make sure the shack steps didn't snap accidentally. And then all I did was drop the shack step down, and it did still want to snap, so I just had to nudge it back slightly until it popped back up to the top. And now I know that my shack steps don't have a gap to the floor underneath, and then I can re-snap my boxcar and all of its structures back on to the new height. So that way nothing looks like it's unsupported. That's one of my big things when I build in Fallout 4. I really like the structures to at least, have the idea of looking realistically supported. I know, half of the time, a scaffolding structure isn't going to support the kind of weight that I would be technically building up on top, but either way, I like things to at least look supported. No gaps in between things as much as I can avoid, unless it's something that you're never going to see. But here's the boxcar correctly positioned, and I'm really happy with this. So here I need to get rid of these shack steps so I can get a doorway on the front, because that just looks a little more complete and closed up. And once that's there, I can replace the boxcar back where it was. So there I have this nice shack wall doorway. And then I can use a boxcar door on the actual boxcar opening, and I use the blue one just for the nice color contrast. Now, this boxcar felt kind of plain by itself, so I had this idea that I would use warehouse roofs over the top of it, but that required me to find a half offset positioning, kind of like on the Sole Survivor's house, on Sturgis' house that I did previously. So using floors and walls, I was able to find my half offset side to side, but now I needed to half offset front to back as well because I wanted to use the corner roofs on the ends. So using a couple floors just to push the spacing back another quarter floor or a half floor unit, and getting rid of my base and moving the wall back into place so I can snap the roof onto that wall. That gives me the perfect spacing, the perfect half offset in either direction to get my roofs on here. And you can see I'm using the roofs that have the structure underneath of them because they look like they attach to the boxcar itself. But I'm not just going to leave those as the only visible structure. I'm also going to build some posts down from this warehouse roof build that I'm doing over the boxcar. And to me, this looks great. I also used a couple of the slightly more beat up versions of those roofs, but they still do have the structure parts underneath of them. I could have left it like this with no posts, but it felt kind of visibly flimsy to me. So I also used a floor to snap in a couple of the shack railings on the inside to make that sort of window look a little bit more structural. Here's the posts that I'm placing around, and I just used the snapping points on the warehouse roofs, and then I used ball track on this corner to give it a little more visible support coming off of those posts that I placed. Now this overhang felt really unsupported, so I snapped in some scaffolding frames, and like I mentioned before, realistically this wouldn't work. These would more than likely collapse after a very short amount of time, but it's still Fallout 4, so to me this works really well, and there's the finished product. For the next house, I'm calling it the clinic house, not because I'm repurposing it into a clinic, but because I am building the clinic in the old carport space. Now the biggest difficulty with this one was this dang tree that I can't scrap that's leaning on the roof that would be easy access for attackers. So keeping that in mind, I found the alignment based on the front edge of the house, just like I did with Sturgis' house. But this one I did differently in the sense that I built the floor soffit all the way across the front to find my lateral positioning first. And here you can see I was off, so I gave it a similar overhang to the boxcar house, and once I had that established, I could then build my end cap to start building my roof. And I'm also going to use shack roofs up top across the ridge like the boxcar house. Now I've got my base soffit running all the way around, and I can come up here and establish what I need to get the shack roofs in place across the ridge of the home, which will then be surrounded by warehouse roof pieces. Now to deal with the problem of this pesky tree leaning on the roof, I think I have a solution for this. As we know, NPCs won't jump over things, so I think some shack railings will do the trick. Now let's give this a quick test and see, and yeah, I think that'll work. Now, other than building the clinic itself, the clinic house is done. The next house I'm calling the market house because it overlooks the main market, and this one was real simple, so here's the finished product. I don't want to waste your time showing the placement of all of that. The only house left to repair is the main house, and the right side of this house was pretty simple, so I'm not going to show that either, but I am going to show you how I built the shack over the carport, which is specifically for Mama Murphy. You can see this little half gap that is left there because I didn't want the platform for the shack intersecting with the house itself, and you can see that little bit of roof sticking out there. So the way I bridged this gap was by using my already existing platform floors to build some warehouse walls up off of, and that way I could snap roofs across the gap with that half offset. This is literally just to cover that gap that was left there between the roof itself and what is going to be Mama Murphy's shack. But my initial attempt, I wasn't happy with the amount of gap that was left, so I just used the drop-down glitch where I got rid of these floors and then let this wall snap down to the height of the carport roof that was existing on the house. Then I just repeated the process, got my roof snapped in here, and then using the roof pieces with their own structures, you can see here that the gap has been minimized, and I was happy with this result. I'm going to come back later and finish that off, but first I want to establish where my access stairs are going to go, because I don't want them hanging off the outside of the structure. So using a combination of barn floors, shack floor, and scaffolding floor, I got my stairs moved to where I want them. And then I started snapping floors based on the height of that stair, but pretty quickly realized that the height wasn't quite acceptable, at least not for me. I mean, this is one of those things that's up to each person. But when I started putting floors in here, I saw this height difference that was left, and I really disliked that. I wanted them to flow in at the right level. So I just manually lowered some floors and made sure I corrected the position such that these corners here were touching. And once I had that established, that wound up being just right to eliminate the height difference here. It did leave a slight gap to the bottom of the stairs themselves, so the way I fixed that later on was by changing the height of the shack platform up above and dropping everything down just a little bit so that it made sense with the way these stairs intersect at the bottom. With those stairs in place, I wanted to finish bridging this gap with roof pieces. So I used a couple more angled walls, got rid of them, and then snapped roofs onto the temporary ones. Now we have this little gap left at the bottom of that roof gap. And so I snapped a wall onto the roof pieces on the front and back, and then realized that this floor was snapping onto the actual platform next to it, and it wouldn't go where I wanted it to. So temporarily store the floor here, and that would allow me to actually snap the floors to the right height and fill this gap pretty effectively, as you can see when I get rid of this here. With that done, now I'm going to go back up to the top and reestablish the height for the shack build. And here is our completed sanctuary main house with space for Marcy and June, and Mama Murphy has her own shack up top. And now we have a rad storm rolling in, so I'm going to hop in my power armor for some rad protection and take a quick walk through and review what I have built so far. On the right is the low house, which is right next to the entrance to Sanctuary. On the left there, I have cleared out the old ruined house that was on that empty foundation. And the two houses that are still standing will be the barracks buildings for Fort Becker. Barracks A is pretty simple, but Barracks B has a little room up top for a shipping container over the old carport. Next on the left is Sturgis' home, which was the first more complicated roof that I built. And then on the right, we see the main house for Sanctuary with Mama Murphy's shack. And across from that, on the left, is the Sole Survivor's house, my house in Sanctuary. Just past the Sole Survivor's house on the left, you can see the boxcar house and then the clinic house. And then, of course, on the right, just behind the main Sanctuary house, is the market house. And these are all of the homes repaired, patched walls, repaired roofs, and each of them are unique and recognizable in their own. Now what we have left to do is all of the custom structures that I'm going to build in the next segment of the video. So we are done repairing the houses. The first custom building that I'm going to construct is the headquarters building for Fort Becker. And I'm building this on this first corner of Sanctuary in place of the completely ruined house that was left over on this foundation. Now, I don't want my settlers walking on bare earth in between the main house and the headquarters building, so I started by aligning a shack foundation to the main house. But my plan here is not to build the headquarters perfectly aligned with the main house either. So once I get these shack foundations in place, I am then going to manually set the angle for the entire headquarters building foundation. And I did this by using a couple of shack railings as reference to tell me what angle I needed to place the next set of foundations to establish the headquarters building angle. It roughly matches the old foundation that was left over, but this took me a couple tries. It's nothing complicated. It just kind of takes a little bit of trial and error. At first I started by going right up to that corner, but once I got to the other side, I realized that the gap left over was too large here. So then all I did was get rid of these floors, go back to my starting floor and make some slight adjustments and push this slightly closer to the other side. So that way I could even out the slight gap left at either end of these foundations. So you can see at the wide end of the shack road, we are 3 full floor units wide, and at the narrow end, we end up with 2 floor units. So I was happy with this gap. Maybe I could have, made them a little bit more even, but I went ahead and went with this. So now it's just a matter of placing the rest of the foundation floors to this base. I burned through that really fast because I think you get the point. I'm just placing foundations. And so my plan here is to make this building look kind of official, almost like a government building. So I want to have columns all the way around it with a building kind of inside of them. That sort of walkway around the building also establishes some of the exterior walls. But back here on the back left corner is where I'm going to build in my deployment chute for when the settlement is under attack and the front gate closes because of the attack siren that will be wired to it. So I'm still going to need a quick and easy way to get out and defend the settlement even when the front gate is closed. And that helps to secure the settlement and keep the non-essential settlers safe, such as Anne Hargraves and the Vault Tech rep. I don't want them to perish in a settlement attack. So using some concrete walls, once we have the trapdoor placed, we can box this in so that it can't be accessed in any other way, and no enemies can walk through this corridor and get to the inside of the settlement either. And all I'm doing here is kind of alternating the walls a little bit and changing the heights slightly so that everything appears to be flush. And with that all established, I can put the walls back in and get floors built back on top of it. So basically, there we have our deployment chute and access corridor. And just to make sure it's easy to use, I add a shack railing on the back edge of the trapdoor opening so I can just walk full speed straight into it and still fall through the trapdoor smoothly. Now I can rebuild the floors that will cover the top of the deployment corridor. And in this area on the back of the building is where I'm going to sink in a space for the big generator, the big fusion core generator. Using these concrete beams, which I'm not exactly sure which mod those came from, I will check that out. But there will be a link to all the mods used for this build in the description for you guys to reference. And that should help you have everything that I am using here to build this stuff for yourself. So, you know, sometimes you got to take a floor away to get a wall back in place. So that's all I'm doing here is just making sure I've got my walls or my floors sunken down and walls all the way around them. Now I'm just placing these floors temporarily so that I can more easily attach the concrete walls to the upper floor, and making sure to keep my exterior walkway floors at a slightly lower level than the actual foundation of the building itself. So once we have all that in place, we can start building our walls around the generator area. And once again, the concrete floors there are temporary. It's just for building the walls more easily. So now we can get rid of these, and that is where the generator is going to live. So let's go ahead and place that. And I did put together a small stairwell using the concrete steps, the short concrete steps there. I had to use 3 of them. Just a little railing here to kind of finish it off. Now, for the upper floor, I just used the floor upper to establish my roof and my floor pieces, because the upper floors of the outer walkway will align straight to those floors that you see up there above the generator room. Putting a powered door here, so I am the only one that can access it, and then eventually I wire in delayed off switches for that. And then snapped right up against these walls, I'm using warehouse pieces to kind of disguise the fact that these walls are all concrete and highly reinforced. So now this area is very secure, and I can continue on building the rest of the walls for the headquarters building. Now on this side, I wanted access to the outside, access to the trapdoor, and the other space here is for a little storage room, because I'm going to have a weapons and armor vendor inside of the headquarters building, kind of, you know, meant to be for the Minutemen soldiers, you know, like a requisition sort of an area. So now I'm just walling those 2 rooms off so that one is for storage and one is for the deployment chute feature. And then in order to kind of partition off the requisition area, I used the security fencing with 2 windows, one for each of the vendors. Initially, I built these roofs around here, but I didn't like those at all. And I also found that I needed to push these concrete walls in slightly to get more of a flush look around the back of the building, because I'm going to replace all of those roofs with a floor all the way around and give it kind of a second story overlook all the way around the building. Now it's time to start getting the walls in on the first floor. And obviously I want a rolling metal door on the front for the main entrance to this building. And here I am starting to build the floors around, but in doing it the way that you just saw, it left the floors at the roof level of the generator room that I built before. So I'm just kind of establishing where my floors are going to go, and right here I realize that my floors are too low and I need to actually raise them up 1 unit. So I went back to the level of the floor above the generator room and re-snapped everything to that. And that's what I liked the best, because it goes right over the top of these little bump out rooms that I built previously. With those floors in place, now it's time to start building up, and eventually we will reach the upper floor of the headquarters building. Now that I've reached this point, I can go ahead and start building the upper floor of the headquarters. This is looking really good, but I need some columns, and the top of the building is missing something, so I'm going to build a sort of spire with the settlement recruitment beacon on top. Now the headquarters building is complete, other than some minor changes here and there that you will see later on. But now I need to revisit the rooftop shack on the sole survivor's house. First I built this, and it was okay, but I wasn't happy with it. It's a little too boxy, a little too boring. So I want to revisit this, and I'm going to show you exactly what I did to change it and make it look a little bit more visually interesting. But now, of course, Ten Pines Bluff needs my help. So let's go give them a hand real quick. Suck it, junk bots. Now I can get back to work and show you what I did to change the rooftop shack above the sole survivor's house. Rooftop shack version 2.0 complete, and you can see that it is much less boxy and much more visually interesting, so mission accomplished there. Now moving back down to the entrance of Sanctuary, this ruined house foundation is going to become the vertibird landing pad. So of course, as with the headquarters building, I'm starting by establishing my foundation angle and spacing to the road. And my plan here is to have a small outdoor space that looks like where the offloaded materials that are being dropped off by the vertibirds can be held, at least temporarily, until they're distributed to the rest of the settlement. So I just spent a little bit of time establishing the height and spacing compared to the barracks building A, because I wanted to have basically a full floor tile coming right up to the nearest corner of the barracks building here. So I got to this point, and now I can just pop in the rest of the floor pieces that make up the vertibird landing pad. Here we go. That fast travel target object is what tells the vertibird where to land when you use it to travel back to your settlements. Since I'm in survival mode, I don't like to use fast travel, so that is my solution for quickly traveling around the Commonwealth. Now, since this portion of the settlement is going to be completely isolated from the rest of it, with no ground access to it, I need to build a bridge across from the headquarters building over straight to the vertibird pad. I did this by aligning some shack floors to the walkway around the headquarters building and then building them across to a small platform that was snapped to the vertibird pad. So this was the result of that, and now that is complete and ready for some detail. Now for the next step in completing the vertibird pad, I wanted to make a portion of the access look as though it was meant for some kind of a loading machine to take the supplies that the vertibirds bring in and place them in the temporary storage holding area just next to the vertibird pad. Then I also wanted to have a clear pedestrian access area to the pad as well. So I did this by building this small platform with some steps. And so now we have what looks like a loading ramp and a walking access. So now from the front of the headquarters building, we can walk around the left side and across the shack bridge to go straight to the vertibird pad. And we can go down here and use our vertibird beacon, which is a mod. Again, all the links to all the mods used will be in the description, but this allows us to call a vertibird, make sure it can land right where it needs to. And it looks like that is successful. Perfect. Now let me just hop in here and I'm going to take a short flight, and once I land I'm going to call another vertibird back to me so that I can then travel back here and make sure that when I return the vertibird properly uses the pad to land on and drop me off. So here I'm going to cut to the return flight. And as I approach, I start hearing and seeing gunfire. So let me hop out of this vertibird real quick and take care of this threat. And I believe we have junk bots again, yes. 1 down, 2 down, 3 down, 4 down. Haha, get it? Robots have no sweat glands. With that out of the way, I can get back to work, and what I want to do now is turn my attention away from the vertibird pad area, across from the low house, and down to the riverfront, where I'm going to build a boardwalk all the way across this retaining wall that was already existing right here. And at the end of the boardwalk, I'm also going to build a water farm so I can start making those sweet, sweet bottle caps to start outfitting my Minutemen. While I was building that, I had a Brahmin finally show up, and it seems really impressed with this place so far. Anyway, it's time to move on to what is potentially my favorite building in the whole of my sanctuary build. Right here, we're going to build our barcade. And since this is a bar/arcade, I wanted to find some very appropriate music to really set the mood here, so I think this will do. Barcade construction complete, and it is now ready for furnishing and decoration. While I have an opportunity, I want to mention where my inspiration came from for editing this video in this style.
Hey.
Recently, I discovered two YouTubers, one by the name of Court and one by the name of Vubs, who both produce really high quality content for Fallout 4 building. Now, this was my first attempt at doing this, adding music and timing the content of my footage to that music. So my video is way longer than all of their content. I'm just not good enough yet to cut things down as much as they do in a way that makes sense. And hopefully one day I'll get there. But those guys inspired me to do this style of video. And thank you guys very much for the inspiration. Now I can move on to building the clinic attached to the clinic house underneath the carport there. And this one's pretty straightforward and self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend much time talking about it. Instead, I'm just going to let you watch how I built it. And there we have the start of our clinic completed. Later on, I also add a small area in the back for a pharmacy. But now we can move on to building the large stores for our Tier 4 merchants that I'm going to bring here, Vault-Tec Rep and Ann Hargraves. So these last two Ruined House foundations are both going to serve as the larger stores for those two, and right in between I'm going to nestle a barbershop. And then around the central tree, I'm going to build a central market hub as well. So here are the completed foundations, and starting with the clothing store, let's build this thing. And that is Hargrave's boutique built and ready for furnishing and decoration, and I definitely didn't want to make this a big box, so I hope I achieved that. Next is the Vault-Tec Reps store, the last stop shop and bots. With the last stop shop completed, I can now move on to building the barber shop nestled in between the last stop shop and Anne Hargrave's boutique clothing store. Now we're cooking with gasoline, and I feel like I'm finally getting a flow and getting the hang of this editing style. Still taking me forever, but either way, let's start building our central market hub around the big tree. I started with some floors to find my alignment and spacing, and once I did that, I built the kind of canopy that overhangs the platform. And now the sanctuary market is completed with our central market hub right here, the two large stores for our tier 4 vendors, the barbershop, the clinic, and the barcade just behind me. Now up to this point, I haven't spent any time securing this settlement, so I am going to come down here to the headquarters building and start constructing the main gate right here. Now, initially, I was going to align to the headquarters building, but that didn't quite work with centering and being in line with the road. So I used these 4 floor pieces to establish my angle, put in my rolling door, and now all I have to do is build the walls off of this to get started on the perimeter walls of Sanctuary. The next step in completing the perimeter walls for Sanctuary is to establish a back gate here between the boxcar house and the clinic house. Now I know what most of you are going to say, perimeter walls are useless in Fallout 4, but I'm using a mod that places all of the spawn points outside of the settlement to ensure that my perimeter walls are in fact useful. So starting with some concrete and a powered door, suddenly Sanctuary came under attack by gunners. So let's pause the build and go take care of that. With that taken care of, the game tells me that I need to go and talk to Preston. So let's see what he has to say.
Well, that's a few gunners that won't be attacking our settlements anytime soon.
We've gotten big enough that we're having trouble communicating with all our settlements. I think it's time to retake the castle.
Dude, I'm building you a headquarters right here. Can we do that later?
Your call. Just let me know when you're ready to pull the trigger.
Oh, I'm always ready to pull the trigger, but let me at least finish this before we go take the castle. So now we can go and finish the back gate, and then I can build the walls up to the clothing store. This will be the perfect place for Marcy Long to stay out of my way and cease to annoy me forever. But I'm really happy with how this back gate and guard post turned out, and this will be a similar thing to what I do for the front two guard posts near the entry bridge to Sanctuary. Now I can keep working on the walls. Now before I build the walls up to the water farm down there, I need to fill this area with several small shack homes, sort of like a shanty town, and this really was a perfect way to fill this space out. I'm really happy with this result, and this also allows us to finish up our walls without this entire area down here looking unused and unfinished and empty. And you can also see the shack road that I built here leading down to the water farm, but now I can really quickly finish up these walls. Let's do it. And just like that, we have the walls completed all the way around down to the water farm. So at this point, the entire settlement from here all the way around to the main gate is secure. But that doesn't mean that we're done yet. We have the entire barracks, building, and vertibird pad area to build a wall around. And we do need another access bridge over to that portion of the settlement. We also have this entire area around the headquarters building unfinished, and we need our entry guard post built out here as well. So before I can start doing walls, I need to build that second bridge, and I'm going to start at this corner right here and get that established. So I started by snapping a shack upper floor onto the 45-degree angle, then a wall, storing the floor and snapping the wall up to ground level. Then I can reattach a shack upper floor to that wall, and this ensures that it is at a reasonable height. We're also going to help these settlers get down off the roof at the end of this bridge. But now I can store the shack wall and run around here to check the height of the shack upper floor using some shack steps. And once I snap these on, I realize there's a slight gap to the floor there. So to fix that, I went around underneath and snapped a couple temporary steps here. and then I can store the floor, let the shack steps snap down to the floor, store the temporary ones, and snap back on the upper floor and build this bridge. Let's get this done. So now we have the entire portion of the settlement with the vertibird pad and barracks buildings completely walled in and secure. And we also have this awesome area for a shooting range / training area for the Minutemen. But now we need to move back to the front of the settlement and build our last 2 guard posts. And there we have it, 2 guard posts in a similar style to what I did for the back gate guard post. And now that we have everything completely secure, I can build the large farm in the open area in the middle of the settlement. I'm not going to show you that whole process. Nobody wants to watch me place hundreds of corn and razor grain, so here's the finished product with a significant amount of potatoes, a large razor grain field, and a very large cornfield, at least for Fallout 4. And with that done, I also needed to have a place for some of the lower or shorter crops, so right here is a perfect space for my greenhouse. Now initially I thought that I would manually place these foundations to line up with the steps, but why not use the shack road that I have already built here to establish that. With the last major structure completed, it is now time for me to spend just as much time as I did building on the decoration, and that is why I'm not going to show any of that in this video. The next segment will be a summarized preview of the completed settlement. After spending just as many hours on the lighting, furnishing, and decoration as I did on the build itself, my revived sanctuary is now fully complete. In the foreground here, you can see the vertibird pad and barracks buildings of Fort Becker, as well as the shooting range just off the screen to the bottom, and the large headquarters building in the center anchoring Fort Becker to the town of Sanctuary. As we pan across past Sturgis House, the Sole Survivor's house, and the Boxcar house, we really start to get a sense of scale of this build. Originally, I wanted to decorate much more densely, but I started encountering the game engine's settlement building limitations. And if you watch on the left side of your screen right now, you can see some of the Hall of Mirrors effect happening still. So that is evidence that I have built as much as I possibly can here, and if I go any further, this area will no longer be playable, and I wanted to retain that. The settlement also looks great at night, thanks to the lighting that I did, so in the full tour video, I will include some night shots. It took me nearly an hour to walk through this settlement and enter into every decorated room to show it off. So if you want to watch the entire tour video, the link will be in the description. Now we're going to drop down here and do a brief walkthrough. And as we approach the front of Sanctuary, we are flanked on each side by the front guard posts. And then we see the original Sanctuary sign as well as an additional marquee sign that I added for a bit of direction into the settlement. On our left is the vertibird pad, and you can also see a glimpse of the cargo area just off of that pad there. As we continue up the main road, we pass by the deployment chute and corridor that is disguised as hazardous material storage, which is directly accessed from the headquarters building of Fort Becker. This building includes a large workshop, a space for Preston Garvey, a communications center, and a war room, as well as a small mess hall. We also, of course, can't forget about the two barracks buildings, A and B. And behind this is the shooting range that I'll show in a little bit. So we continue up the long main road entrance, and we finally arrive at the main gate, where Preston Garvey is standing guard, as he should be, I think. I mean, this is going to be his home base for this entire playthrough, so he needed a permanent spot within the settlement. Entering the main gate, immediately to our left is Sturgis' home, which you can see is now surrounded by what looks to be a junkyard. And on our right is the caravan trading post for the Bunker Hill traders. Extra caps for me. Just past the trading post, we can access the front entrance of the main building of Fort Becker and take a quick peek at the fully equipped workshop, which also has not one but two quartermasters ready to equip any Minutemen that needs it. So now let's continue up the main road, and we pass by the Sole Survivor's house, which also has rooftop shacks for extra accommodations. And we have the Sanctuary main house, which has not only been repaired, but I have also added a space for Mama Murphy that is all her own. So she sits out here on her covered porch and waits to read tarot cards for whoever is interested, as long as they bring her the Kims. As we continue down the main road, we come across the Boxcar House, and directly across the street from the Boxcar House is the Gilded Ghoul Barcade. This is one of the buildings that looks exceptional at night, and it includes arcade cabinets, a pool table, and, just like the name, two ghoul bartenders. That was by design. So we continue up the road and we walk past the back gate and back guard post where Marcy Long stands guard, and we pass by the clinic house. Not because the house itself is a clinic, but because the clinic is attached to the house. The clinic includes a pharmacy to the right, a general practitioner as you enter, and the back room is for the surgeon. So despite being quite small, this is what I would consider a full-service clinic that serves the entire settlement. Just down the road a little bit is our market, and it is anchored into the settlement by the central market hub here. The red canopies are from the animated canopies mod, and again, links to all the mods used for this build will be in the description, even if I didn't mention them during the video. This market hub contains every type of store except for another bar/restaurant stall. The way I did my stores is I wanted one of each level of store except for the level 1s, just so we could generate more caps. We also have the Last Stop Shop and Bots, which is the general store that I built specifically for the Vault Tech rep, who clearly has over 200 years of sales experience. Next to that is the barber shop, complete with a small waiting area because he would probably get a lot of patrons, being the only barber in this area for now. And next to that, we have Hargrave's Boutique, where Anne Hargraves sells her fine clothing to anyone who's interested. And of course, the Market House, which is very simple, but reasonable accommodations. Going past Hargrave's Boutique, we can pass through the shack town that I built just behind it. And this brings us down to the water farm. And we can then start to walk down the boardwalk past the greenhouse. I really like this feature because it provides an openness to the settlement which would otherwise feel kind of confined, although it is very secure. But I wanted to have a nice view at least somewhere. To our right is our large crop farm, where I have corn, razor grain, and potatoes. And straight ahead of us is the Brahmin pen. And I put it here because really I couldn't think of anything else to do with this area. And as we turn and head up this shack road, we pass by the Low House, which is another very simple home, but is good accommodations for the farmers of Sanctuary. And walking past the Low House, we can head up these shack steps, and we arrive back at the headquarters building for Fort Becker. This time I'm going to turn left and walk past the building so we can head across the bridge and get a couple of quick details of the separate portion of Fort Becker that is only accessible by walking across these bridges that I have built from the headquarters building. From here, we start to get a look at the vertibird landing pad to the left, as well as the cargo holding area just off of the pad. And to the right, we start to see the barracks buildings. So we're not going to turn left and look at the landing pad again. I'm going to turn right and take us past Barracks A to see what is in between them very quickly, because I haven't shown any of the area here at all yet in the video. I didn't feel it was worth showing the build because the length of the video was already getting crazy. So here we have our gunsmithing area, complete with 2 public shooting ranges to the left for any settlers that wish to hone their skills, and they choose the shooting ranges over any other form of entertainment. And through here we have our 4 shooting range booths, specifically for training Minutemen. The targets here are wired to fireworks mortars, so that's how we can gauge the abilities of new recruits. Now we can walk back across bridge number 2 to the headquarters building and continue past it and eventually arrive back at the main gate. This project took much longer than I originally expected. I've literally been working on this since my last upload over 2 months ago. And between the 2 weeks it took me to level up this character, and all the time it took me to build and decorate this settlement and edit this video, it has taken me upwards of 2 months. If you stuck around and watched this whole thing, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I commend you for doing so. This video got really, really long. Again, the inspiration for the editing style of this video came from YouTubers Court and Vubs, and I'd like to thank them again for their excellent content and for inspiring me to try a new style of editing. If you haven't joined my Discord, please do so. We'd love to have you over there. And again, please consider supporting me on Patreon for $3 a month, where you can watch all of my monetized YouTube content ad-free. And with all that, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this massive settlement build, and I will see you in the next video.